I want to take a moment to clarify what I mean by ruined. I don't think Invincible is bad now. I actually feel quite the opposite. Current Invincible has some very strong sci fi elements, great character moments, some scenes that are just straight up awesome, and the way Viltrumites are handled and depicted is extremely well done. But something is missing. Something extremely significant to what Season 1 was for me. And no, it's not the fucking animation, dude. I'm so tired of hearing about that shit. I know the show has no animation budget, but it has tight deadlines, so give him a break. Anyway, I wholeheartedly believe Invincible Season 1 is and probably will always be the best part of the show. I think that something this part of the show had that is now missing elevated the show so far above its later seasons that the drastic tonal shift actually really bothers me, and it made me feel like I'm watching a different show. There's something here in this first season that makes Invincible really feel like art more than the roller coaster ride that the later seasons feel like for me. It's something I don't see genuinely anyone really talk about, and if they do, they merely brush the subject and for the wrong reasons. To get into my point about how the show lost something after its first season, we have to delve a bit into season 2 and what happened right after the first season. Season 2 of Invincible kind of sucked. I don't think that's super controversial, though it might ruffle some feathers, but the second season completely killed the tension and rising action present throughout all of the first season. This is inherent, given that Omni-Man is no longer hiding on Earth, so it's no longer this mystery thriller about the show getting closer and closer to who Omni-Man actually is. But the way the show handles the aftermath of what was clearly a generational tragedy for humanity in Season 1's finale, as well as Omni-Man as a character, just feels wrong. It doesn't feel like it ever gave these questions left over from the first season what they deserved. Coming in from the first season, viewers were excited to see how Omni-Man's horrific reveal would leave lasting effects on the characters in the show, and the trauma and complex psychological effects something like this could have on someone as young as Mark. But what do we get? We get Karma Police by Radiohead. That's not to say it isn't a cool start. I love this song and its connotation, being that Mark feels like he is, in essence, reduced to the Karma Police of Earth. But it's the fact that this is really the extent of what we get regarding the aftermath of Season 1. It's a big critique I had of the show's final episode immediately after I watched it, where, after being used as a battering ram to turn families into a red paste, Mark basically goes, "Well, guess I'm going back to school," and it hypes up the next season with this happy-go-lucky vibe after this horrible tragedy. I hated it, and I think Season 2 and the rest of the show extends this feeling dramatically. The show replaces interesting questions brought by the ending of Season 1 with some far less interesting themes, such as the effect of Mark being a superhero on his daily life. I feel like this could have been interesting if it wasn't placed so terribly right after what we had just seen in Season 1, and if it felt like much less of a side quest. But it just kind of bored me and was annoying that the show put so much energy into it, because frankly, I didn't care. We already really didn't like Amber in Season 1, and while she was a lot better here, we didn't really want to see so much of their relationship. I recognize Season 1 tackled this a lot too, but it felt out of place here. It's not like I exclusively wanted the show to be Mark in a depressive episode when he realizes just how many people he'd turned to red paste in his battle, but I also didn't want the show to treat it like a mild inconvenience. I don't know. We can really see how Season 2 killed a lot of the tension and how the show fell off in popularity until Season 3 showed people it could be cool again and they came back to start watching again. Additionally, going into Season 2, the idea of Omni-Man just being out there carried so much weight. I would get incredibly excited for what was going to happen when Omni-Man was on screen in the first season because it was always important and meaningful. We were all wondering what wild shit was going to go down when he showed up again in Season 2, after the Armageddon he brought in that last episode. But what happens instead? We get the weird Bug People episode. I realized the shock and awe of how awkward that was the point, and that it's comic accurate, but I, regardless, don't feel like that was the right direction to go, or the way to treat Omni-Man right after the first season. You see, Omni-Man was fucking scary in Season 1. He was horrifying, this impossibly powerful force whose intentions we were completely in the dark of. Now, here, it seems like he just sort of flicks a switch and starts working towards the redemption arc. It doesn't hit like it should have for me. It feels like a lot more could have been done with the position the show was in from Season 1. It also feels like it happens too fast. I recognize that basically nobody accepts his redemption, and the show works to make that happen over the next few seasons. But the way he goes from mercilessly and unsympathetically pounding his son's face in
17 more years.
and decapitating human beings like they're nothing, to just being this dad trying his best to awkwardly right his wrongs is incredibly jarring. Even in the context of the show, he has to undo centuries of Viltrumite indoctrination. I know that's partially the point, but I don't think that makes any of it work. There was no smooth transition. Actually, the change even happened mostly off screen for Omni-Man. The whole thing was just weird to me. Overall, my point was that the show really diverts from season 1 in both themes and the general feel of the show. While the next seasons rise far above season 2 in quality and writing, this issue still presents itself and sabotages much of the show for me. For example, a major consequence of all these things is that there's a level of groundedness that is just absent after season 1, and it's evident in its treatment of Mark's mental health. For example, in season 3, when Conquest pulls the same move on Mark that Omni-Man did in the subway, I expected Mark to break down into this visceral PTSD episode. But he didn't, even though the fight overall was great. The show really trivializes Mark's mental state and the effect season 1 had on him in this way throughout its runtime. Like, in season 4's first episode, Mark was just depicted as kinda sad and tired looking as a result of everything he's been through, rather than displaying any meaningful effects to his mental health. Hi, this is editing me here. I realize in the footage that I am literally showing as I'm saying this, Mark does have a sort of post-traumatic flashback here, and this is really cool. I like this, but my main issue is that this is all we really get, and this is all the way in season 4. This is, aside from the end of the season with the Thrag hallucinations, this is about all we get for Mark's mental health. But I will be addressing a bunch of other little quips in the video at the end like this. And also another big thing that I want to make note of here is that when the show does things like this, it feels like it's doing them just because it makes sense to, not because it's actually building to anything or saying anything meaningful. It feels like it's doing this just because it'd be weird if Mark didn't display any mental health troubles with the horrific shit he's seen. But it's not really to give him any meaningful arc to me. I don't know. Could be wrong. Comics are coming. Who knows? Anyway. And I say things like this not because I want a different show. Like, for example, not because I want to change the entire Conquest fight. But these things seemed like where the show was going in season 1, with the realism and groundedness that added so much to the show. And it's kind of just missing now. I think season 4 does this the best regardless, though, as he has flashbacks a couple times. Eventually, he even starts to full-on hallucinate, which was absolutely a step in the right direction for me, since it gives payoff to all the horrible things the Viltrumites have done to him. Regardless, though, in every other season, Mark's mental health is really sidelined. It's just kind of lightly touched on. I know later seasons may explore this further with the coming events, but it definitely feels a bit late to me. It feels like we're getting distracted for much of the show. It feels like the show is leading us on this pointless tangent to fill the runtime about characters and stories that aren't very interesting, like Amber and Rex, even though not to say I don't like those characters, but it's so that when a Viltrumite finally appears, it's still shocking and carries the same weight. And it's not that the stories are all bad. I like Rex and Adam Eve, and a lot of the other characters like much of the community does, but it just felt like a chore to get through a lot of this regardless. I was always, itching to get to the meat of when Viltrumites would be on screen. Then when one finally comes on screen, the show knows we're gonna lock in and start clapping with our lollipops and propeller hats, so everything abruptly changes tone and the animation gets 10 times better. But this isn't entirely what I'm talking about mainly when I say that something is missing. Just a symptom of this, or another part of why the show doesn't hit the same. Let's go back to season 1 for a bit. Actually, let's go back to how it felt to watch season 1 in 2021. This show was something else. Getting misled into thinking it was another standard superhero story for kids, until Omni-Man pops Red Rush's head like a grape, was one of the show's best and most surprising qualities. It created so many questions about Omni-Man, what he wanted, who he really was, and where things were going after that. It also, most importantly, created this flow between episodes and building tension as we knew what was eventually coming with Omni-Man's reveal. And the show fucking delivered. This last episode is almost the sole reason of why season 1 was so influential and beloved. All the tension and character building and Omni-Man's mystique all bubble up and fucking explode in this final fight that seems like it hits you in the face out of nowhere, even when it really doesn't. Because I wasn't prepared for that subway scene. I was not. I sat there, probably like 16 years old, mouth gaped open, watching Mark squirm as the blood and guts of the people he was supposed to save splatter over him. Watching his greatest idol beat him to a pulp. It was fucking moving. It changed everything Mark thought he knew about having his powers and his worldview. It was a meaningful fight and also a really good fight in general. What I want to talk about most, however, is this last scene with Omni-Man punching Mark repeatedly on the mountain. I want to talk about the shivers that this scene gave me. When Nolan is throwing these visceral, squelching, bloody punches, and Mark's teeth shoot out of his mouth, clattering on the ground, and the show transitions into a flashback of Mark in Little League Baseball hitting a ball. This scene. Debbie's speech here was beautiful. And if you don't remember it in its entirety, I implore you to rewatch it. I'll give you a little snippet of it here.
When he feels joy, we feel joy. See that look on his face? How can you see that and not feel the same way?
Her teaching Nolan how children bring meaning and how they remind older parents of the small joys in life. This was almost definitely written by someone who is truly a parent. It's incredible, with the music slowly building up as Nolan joins in cheering for Mark, and inevitably transitioning from little Mark's face to current Mark's bloody, disfigured face. It's this scene right here, along with Mark's perfect,
Look at you, Dad. I still have you.
I absolutely implore you to rewatch this scene, because it gives me goosebumps every time. This is what I wanted more of from Invincible. It's not incredible just because the fight is cool like the Conquest fight, or because of all the gore like the other Conquest fight, or because of the incredible line delivery from all the actors involved, even though that certainly helps. It's cool because it uses what the story built up to say something beautiful that also adds incredible depth to the characters and the stakes. It's cool because it gives me shivers and it makes tears well up in my eyes. This is something that was tragically lost from the show after season 1. The lesson the show seems to have taken from this fight was not the meaning, but rather that blood and guts can be used to substitute for thematic depth. This isn't to say that later fights are bad, they're great, but they are significantly less so than this fight in season 1. For example, later seasons seem to treat people like big exploding bags of red paste, or water balloons to burst for dramatic effect. People just kind of get chopped up and torn to pieces because that's just kind of what happens now, because the show is dark and gritty, like with Duplicate's fake out death. Sometimes it's used to good effect, like to show Viltrumite power, but people's visceral deaths really have little meaning to the show aside from maybe Powerplex, which is always my greatest fear when watching a show that uses gore like this. Getting desensitized to the violence because it doesn't matter anymore. Conquest chops people up. Mark doesn't care after. But Mark having to kill one person to save the world is framed as this huge decision for him, and I know there's more to it than that. Another big example is the infamous Mark spaghetti scene, where he's getting his intestines pulled out, which I probably can't show this. But it seems like it was included just to gross viewers out and get people talking about the show. It doesn't really serve the fight very much. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it had a great shock effect, but I was really thinking, how the hell did Mark survive this? It was really just gore for the sake of it, compared to Nolan's bloodied fists, showing his ruthlessness and the corrupted image of Mark's idol, with the fight's brutality mimicking real domestic violence with parents. I just wanted more of that meaning. I wanted more of the show teaching us and Omni-Man the value of being a parent. I wanted to see Omni-Man gradually have more of these moments until what he's done really sets in, and maybe his redemption arc seems a little more smooth and natural. Like, the show alluded to this with the effect of Mark's answer to his "What will you have?" question on him, but we get this really awkward redemption arc instead in its place. I do really like Debbie's confrontation with Nolan about what happened in season 4. It's a great scene, but it's such an isolated incident, and also to think that they got back together in the comics is kind of insane to me. I recognize that this is what happened in the comics, I know, so maybe this is a critique of the comics too. It's just that there is so much potential with Omni-Man here. I stand by this when I say this. Omni-Man should never have joined the good side. It wasted his character, it was awkward, and it was kind of a waste of J.K. Simmons' incredible line delivery for emotional or dramatic moments when he's an evil character. I know the show goes into Nolan's desperate efforts to show his family he's changed and his efforts to be a good dad. His desperate efforts to reach out and right his wrongs. It's kind of cool, but I don't think it's done remotely as well as the scene I talked about. Because rather than these incredible scenes of drama and tension with Nolan, we now get J.K. Simmons talking about some random menial sci fi bullshit or in jokes with Alan that weigh down his character a bit. I don't get excited when he's on screen anymore because he's a regular character in the story now with much less impact. The only time I kind of got this was with the Debbie scene. I'm kind of the opinion that we should have seen Nolan join with the Viltrumites and show their evil more. We should have seen Nolan gradually be the force that shows these monsters are capable of humanity in a more subtle way, which I know we're getting that in the coming seasons, but I feel that it would have been more impactful in this way, mostly because it would have made Nolan's change more sensible and impactful. It would have kept the foreboding, for lack of a better word, aura he had and made his gradual turn to good a lot more nuanced. Maybe I'm getting too imaginative with really just creating the show I want in my head, but this is all kind of based on what season 1 seemed to imply would come. This would have accentuated the themes the show is already trying to convey. I also can't say enough about how the show really babyifies Omni-Man when he switches sides. I know power scaling is a big, unignorable issue of the show, but it definitely doesn't help. Like, go watch him destroying the Flaxland planet again in season 1, then think about how much less threatening he is when he's fighting with Mark. It's like the trope when you beat a boss and you get him as a playable character and he's ridiculously weakened. Now, the show is really much more sci fi than anything, which is still good. It's still insanely cool. The Viltrumites and Thrag are indescribably awesome, and their story with the Scourge virus is metal as fuck. There is still a lot to love about the show, but overall, the show feels more of a thrill roller coaster ride to me than anything. I want to end things off with a bit of improv. First off, I know that me suggesting that Omni-Man shouldn't be redeemed is a very hot take. Um, I hope to justify my reasoning a little bit. Firstly, I think because of his redemption, the show really glosses the fuck over how horrific what he did in Chicago was. The like 17 9/11s he committed. It seems like Mark gets harsher treatment from the world than Omni-Man does often, especially with Oliver like looking up to him. The most significant moment is Cecil mentioning or dropping the number of deaths on Omni-Man, which was admittedly really cool. I love that scene, but that's like the only thing really that just kind of puts into perspective the weight of those lives. And then lastly, a big thing that, well, ties into the sort of Gore is sort of taken for granted in the show. Rex Splode getting a brain injury, like getting half his head like shot off or something, like almost dying. Um, I still like I don't see how that serves the story very well. Like it kind of just it's disturbing for the sake of disturbing, and I get that it serves his character arc a bit, but it's more that that's one of the biggest things I can recall from season 2. I don't really like season 2 if you guys couldn't tell. Anyway, that um that ends off this video. I am not a YouTuber. I just kind of wanted to get this out there. This is a very amateur video essay with some very hot take things to say. Please go easy on me, but please subscribe. Because if this does well, I will. I really want to make a Arcane season 2 video. Um, because I'm like a year behind on the discourse. I guess I like to. I don't know. See ya.